Once upon a time, Prince Vachagan, the king's only son, was traveling on one of his many hunting trips with his brave and trusty servant Nazar and his faithful sheepdog Zanzi. By the prince and his servant came to the village of Adzik and sat down by a spring to rest. Just then the girls of the village came to fetch water. The prince was thirsty and asked them for a drink. One of the girls filled a jug and handed it to him, but another girl pulled the jug out of her hands and poured the water onto the ground. Then she filled the jug again and again emptied it. Vachagan's throat was parched, but the girl went on as though teasing him. She filled and emptied the jug 6 times, and then she finally handed it to him. He drank his fill and then demanded of the girl, "Why didn't you let me drink right away? Were you playing with me, teasing me, or what?" "No," answered the girl, "we do not tease strangers in our village. But you were tired and hot, and the cold water might have harmed you. I gave you time to cool off." The girl's words astonished Vachagan, and he was charmed by her beauty. He inquired, "What is your name?" "Anahit," said the girl. "Who is your father?" "He is a shepherd Aaron, but why do you want to know our names?" "Is it so terrible to ask?" "I suppose not, but then it wouldn't be so terrible for you to tell me your name and where you come from." "Should I tell you the truth or lie to you?" "Whichever you consider most worthy." "I consider it most worthy to tell the truth, and the truth is that I cannot yet disclose my name." "Very well, but in the meantime, please give me back my jug." Saying farewell to the king's son, Anayt took up her jug and walked away. The prince, his trusty servant, and his dog returned home. Vachagan's heart was heavy within him. His mother, the queen, came to him and asked, "Dear Vachagan, what ails you?" "Mother, the pleasures of life hold no charm for me any more. I yearn to go into the desert, to the village of Adzik, and marry the shepherd's daughter, Anayt." The queen was much alarmed at the prospect of her son's marrying a shepherd's daughter, and her husband, the king, heartily agreed with her. But Vachagan wouldn't hear of having any other bride. Finally, the king and queen reluctantly accepted his choice. They sent their son's faithful attendant Nazar and 2 noblemen to Adzik to ask the shepherd for the hand of his daughter. The shepherd received the visitors in a hospitable manner. The guests sat down on a carpet that Aaron spread out for them. "What a beautiful carpet," said Nazar. "Your wife made it?" "I have no wife. She died some 10 years ago," replied the old shepherd. "My daughter Anayt wove the carpet." "We are glad to hear that your daughter is such an artist," said one of the noblemen. "Rumors of her virtues have reached the palace. The king has sent us here to talk things over with you. He wishes to give your daughter in marriage to his only son, the heir to the throne, Prince Vachagan." The nobleman expected that Aaron would leap to his feet from joy at hearing this unexpected news. "Dear guests," said Aaron, "the truth is that I have no power to decide whom my daughter will marry. She must decide for herself. If she says yes, then I have nothing against it." At that moment Anayt entered, carrying a basket of ripe fruit. She bowed to the guests, placed the fruit on a tray, served it, and then sat down to the loom. "Anayt, why do you work alone?" asked Nazar. "We have heard that you've taught quite a number of pupils to weave." "That is true," she replied, "but I let them go to gather grapes." "I also hear that you have taught your pupils to read and write?" "Yes, I have. Now the shepherds read as they tend their flocks and teach each other to read and write." "With us learning is not so developed," sighed the prince's servant, Nazar. "City dwellers are lazy. But if you come to us, then perhaps you can teach us all to read and write. Anayt, cease your work. I have important matters to discuss with you. The son of our king, Prince Vachagan, met you at the spring. You gave him water to drink, and he liked you. The king has sent us to ask you to become his son's wife." "So the hunter of the well was the king's son?" "He is a very nice young man. But let me ask you one thing. Does he know a trade?" "Anayt, he is the king's son. All citizens are his servants. He doesn't have to know a trade. That is so, but even a master can at times be forced to become a servant. Everyone should know a trade. When the king and queen heard how Anayt had answered, they were relieved and felt sure that Vachagan would change his mind about marrying the peasant girl. Instead, he said, Anayt is right. I must master some craft, just like all other people. So the king had no choice but to call together his noblemen in council. They sent to Persia for a skilled craftsman, and in a single year Vachagan learned to expertly weave cloth. He wove a piece for Anayt out of precious golden threads and sent it to her. When Anayt received it, she said, "Tell the king's son I consent to marry him." The marriage celebrations lasted 7 days and 7 nights. Now it happened that soon after the wedding, Vachagan's friend and trusted attendant Nazar suddenly disappeared. Despite an intensive search, no trace of him could be found. Finally, all hope of ever finding him again was abandoned. Some years passed. The king and the queen, having lived to a ripe old age, both passed away. Vachagan became king, and Anayt became queen. One day, Anayt said to her husband, "From time to time, perhaps you should inspect the whole country yourself, going around in disguise, sometimes dressed as a beggar, and sometimes as a worker or a merchant." "You're quite right, Anayt," said King Vachagan. "How can I go now? Who will rule the kingdom in my absence?" "I shall," said Anayt. "Then I shall set forth tomorrow. If I'm not back in 20 days, you will know that something has happened to me." So King Vachagan, disguised as a common peasant, roamed about his kingdom. Finally, he approached the city of Peroj. At the outskirts of Peroj, a band of robbers suddenly attacked him. The robbers stole all his money and dragged him to a cave deep within the forest. The cave opening was bolted with an iron door. The head robber threw Vachagan against the cave wall. He snarled, "What craft, if any, do you know? I can weave such a precious cloth of gold that it's worth 100 times more than mere gold thread. Tell me what instruments and materials you need, and then you can start to work." The head robber marched outside the door and locked it behind him. Finding himself thus cut off, Vachagan moved deeper inside the cave. He walked on for some time. Suddenly, a faint gleam of light appeared ahead of him. He went towards the light and came to a part of the cave from which he could hear groans and cries. Suddenly a shadow moved towards him. As it came nearer, the shadow seemed to take the form of a man. Stuttering and weeping, he said, "Follow me, I shall show you everything." He led the king down a wide corridor. A number of pale men sat working. Some were sewing, some were weaving, and some were embroidering. The guide, who looked like a skeleton, then explained, "That monster, that head robber who brought you here, got hold of us a long time ago. Men who do not know a craft are killed after they are robbed, and men who know a craft have to work like slaves until the day they die." Vachagan looked at the man closely and recognized his dear and faithful servant Nazar. Soon, a member of the robber band, a very tall man, delivered the requested materials, and Vachagan began to work. He wove a piece of marvelous gold cloth that was covered with designs, into which he wrote a full description of what was happening in the cave. Vachagan said, "I told your leader before that my cloth was worth 100 times its weight in gold. Between you and me, this particular piece is worth more. It's a pity that not all will understand the true value. Only wise Queen Anayt herself could know what this piece is really worth." Hearing this, the tall robber decided to say nothing about this to anyone, not even his leader, the head robber. Instead, the tall robber decided to secretly sell the piece of cloth to the queen herself and pocket the entire sum. In the meantime, Queen Anayt ruled the country so well that all were satisfied. But Anayt was greatly worried. 30 days had now passed since her husband's departure, which meant that her husband was now 10 days overdue. One morning, she was told that a merchant had arrived from foreign lands and wanted to show her some wares. The merchant bowed to the queen and handed her a piece of gold cloth. She glanced at it, without examining the design, and said, "What is the price of your cloth?" "O gracious queen, it is worth 300 times its weight in gold." "What, the cloth is as expensive as that?" "Gracious queen, this cloth contains a mystic power. Do you see those designs? They are not just ordinary ones, but magical talismans. Whoever wears them will be happy forever." "Really?" said Anayt, and spread out the cloth. She saw that there were no talismans on it, but a series of designs made of letters. She read them in silence, and this was the meaning the writing conveyed to her. "My incomparable Anayt, I am in a terrible situation. The man who brings you this cloth is one of the monsters who is keeping us captive. Nazar is here with me. Search for us to the east of the city of Peroj, in a cave marked by an iron door that lies near a crescent-shaped lake." Anahit read the message through twice, pretending to admire the designs. Then she said, "I know who you are. Guards, seize this man and throw him into prison." When the man was led away, Anahit ordered the alarm to be given. Anahit came out of the balcony, armed. "Citizens," she cried, "the life of your king is in grave danger. All who love him must follow me." In an hour all were armed and on horse. She reined in her horse only when she arrived at the crescent-shaped lake east of the city. Anahit soon noticed the cave door set in from the banks of the lake. A terrible sight met the gaze of the citizens. Men who looked more like ghosts than living beings crawled out of the terrible dungeons. The last to come out were Vachagan and Nazar, supporting each other and shielding their eyes from the sun. Shortly thereafter, she and her warriors emerged from the cave, dragging along behind their horses the members of the robber band. The faithful servant Nazar, weeping, kissed the queen's hand and said, "O great queen, you saved us today." "You're mistaken, Nazar," said Vachagan. "She saved us years ago, on the day when she asked you whether the son of the king knew a trade."